This is Tyler, your antisocial critic and the host of the AntiSocial Network, your #1 source for anachronistic conversations online. Come join us each week to hear opinions from some of the best voices discussing entertainment, politics, religion, and modern life on the internet today, most of which you never heard of, but I have. Joining us this week on the AntiSocial Network is Chicago Liberal. He came on the podcast previously with our discussion with Alkazai and was sufficingly not allowed to talk for the duration of 2 hours, but now I figured we could have him on and just kind of talk one-on-one and see where that goes. How's it going?
Pretty good. How about you?
Pretty good, all things considered. I've officially reached 6 months of the lockdown about a week ago. And that started hitting me real hard, and I'm realizing that it's not having work for that long is just completely screwed with my work ethic and my daily life, and I'm like, oh, I put in my 1 day of work per week, I might as well just nap for 6 days in a row. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Gosh, it's so terrible, and I'm so ready to go to work, but my job hasn't even opened up yet, so I'm like, what the heck am I supposed to do?
Yep.
Anyway, I didn't have any specific topics I wanted to discuss today. I mean, last time I did the show, I had Mitch on, and then I got really freaking lazy for like 3 weeks, and I just like, I don't want to talk to people right now. It's hard. And I've been working on all these other projects, a couple of which I told you about, but I finally decided, I was like, okay, fine, I'm gonna do an episode of my podcast that I enjoy doing. But I didn't.
Allegedly, you enjoy doing.
Well, that's the thing. Like when I enjoy the process of being in the call, but everything else around it is irritating. Is I gotta set up a time, and I gotta place my day around it. Then I gotta edit it for like 3 hours. But then I'm in the call. It's like, oh hey guys, how's it going? It's just fun.
Yeah.
Do I sound deranged right now? Because I feel that way.
Yeah, this is why for British Night and my new podcast, we're not even bothering with having guests on most of the time. Just us two being idiots and reading the news.
Well, tell us about that. I mean, how's that your new project going? I know Mitch ended his podcast officially like 2 weeks ago, but now you one started too, so.
Yeah, it's actually doing pretty well.
So what is the deal with that so far? What are you using it to do?
Well, I'm using it to go and have something to do in the day.
Is it that bored? Are you that bored at work? Are you not doing anything, getting anything done?
Yeah.
Oh my, they're not working you hard enough, are they?
Yeah, pretty much.
So, I don't know much about British Knight, but what's his deal?
He's British?
Please don't just say he's a knight.
No, he's not a knight.
I was gonna say he's not. If he's knighted, that's gonna make it hard, make it easy to dox him because there aren't that many knights.
Yeah. And if he was a knight, why the hell does he want me on?
You're right. Hi, I was been knighted by the Queen, and I'm going to channel that into a low-stakes YouTube channel.
Having some dude from Chicago who should be institutionalized be on a podcast.
Wait a minute, which one? Okay, wait a minute. There's 2 people from Chicago in this podcast. Which one?
Yes.
I don't know, man. I was joking on Twitter a couple weeks ago, like, yeah, let's just repeat the plot of Escape from New York and just turn all of our major cities into prisons. That would solve a couple of problems right now.
Yeah.
No one would have to deal with anyone else ever again.
I'd be fine with that.
Well, thankfully, you're not actually in Chicago, so you wouldn't have to deal with the consequences of that. I have a couple friends in Chicago to be like, I disagree with this idea. But...
Yeah, but they're from Chicago. Who cares?
I don't know. Some are hot. Like, I know some hot girls in Chicago. It's like, I don't know if I want to trap them there.
This is a no simp podcast. You want to leave.
To be fair, none of them have an online presence. They're just people I know in my personal life who happen to be hot. So, does that count as sipping?
Yes.
Oh, that's sad.
You can simp people in real life too.
If everyone is a simp, then no one is, CL.
Yes.
So I guess if we're going to talk about anything, I kind of wanted to hear a little bit about what you got going for yourself, because I know you call yourself Chicago liberal, and I've never really asked you about what that
And
means.
I'm not a liberal, and I'm not even in Chicago.
Well, that has a context to it. I mean, I know it refers to Misesianism, but I don't know. I haven't read any Mises.
Yeah, to the Misesian tradition of liberalism.
Yeah, that's what I figured it was a reference to. The one tradition
of liberalism was Altazai calls like reactionary, even though it's not.
I mean,
like, if he wants reactionary, I can go and quote some reactionary philosophy at him too.
A lot of people online who follow Misesianism seem to kind of turn into tradcons, and I know your friend Mac. She's been just kind of breaking down in real time and turning into like a full like neo-reactionary as time's going on.
Nah, she ain't.
I mean, she what was that thing a week or 2 weeks ago she posted where it's like, I'm sorry that we're gonna have to start killing people soon, but
yeah, that was a joke.
I don't know what the joke anymore.
Funny is.
I'm not saying it wasn't
funny,
you live
in Chicago. This is home of Second City.
I can't tell what's a joke anymore, CL. Everything is real. I mean, I'm sure she was kidding, but it's one of those things where it's like a couple of the would Misesians be considered like anarcho-capitalists? Well, what would be their? Okay.
Well, Misesians are more minarchists. The anarcho-capitalists are the Rothbardians.
Okay, that's an important distinction. I don't want the Rothbardians mad at me, because in my experience, Twitter minarchists and Twitter anarchists.
All two of them will watch this.
Yeah, all two of them. Hey, British Knight, share this out. I need to get some. I need famous. I need people to send money to me in large quantities. Please help.
He needs money. Yeah.
I just need to make my first million, and then I'm gonna turn into a hermit and give up on humanity. So.
You already didn't?
Well, I have to have money before I leave society. That's how that works. That's how they keep you in a society, by making you need
Then just say no and leave.
What are
you gonna do?
I'm not resourceful enough to be a dirt farmer. Becoming a destitute dirt farmer to own the libs.
Yes. Then that's kind of what Ireland did until like the 90s.
Well, yeah, they had Protestant terrorists.
Own the English.
Ireland's kind of intense. They have a lot of things that are going on there that no one else in the world has. Protestant terrorists. But yeah, tell me, what kind of drew you to the Misesian stuff then? Like, what's your attraction to that?
Well,
I don't even know I don't even necessarily know what the Misesianism is, just beyond minarchism. So could you give me a?
It's pretty much just take off the teachings of Ludwig von Mises, and that's what it is. However, as of late, I'm more Hoppian, but I'm just too lazy to change my Twitter handle.
Oops.
I'm just lazy.
Chicago Hoppian.
That works.
It doesn't quite roll off the tongue.
Physically removing people via the Sears Tower instead of helicopters. It's over 1,000 feet up. It works.
Oh my gosh. This is... I don't want this podcast to be the thing where like people will go full fashy. Please don't just go full fashion on my podcast like right now. I promised Alkazai I would keep you from...
Sure, that's not even full fashion.
I promised Alkazai I'd keep you from going that far. We need to keep you...
Well, you went wrong with promising Alkazai that I'll do things. That just makes me want to do the opposite.
Well, this is why I'm friends with people who are edgy online, because because the one thing that you can do online to be certain...
Because we make you look not edgy?
Huh?
Because we make you look normal?
Well, the one thing you can do to make people keep people from going, like, completely fash is to be friends with them. Like, that's the one thing that the far left always gets wrong, is that you don't cancel people when you want them to stop being fashy. You be their friend and convince them that and just kind of talk to them like a normal person, and people just kind of naturally drift that way. Like, I have from some friends in real life that have fashy opinions and that skirted really close to that line, but because I was their friend and because I was kind of I was poking and prodding at them, they kind of they didn't go full fash. And I think that's what people should kind of keep in mind, is that that's how you help people. You be their friend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't think you're that bad. You're not full fash yet. You're not full fash.
I'm never going to be, because fascism requires everything to be within the state, and I want to abolish the state.
Oh, great. But what about that doesn't mean the right-wing death squads still aren't going to be a thing, so...
I'm a conservative ANCAP who doesn't believe that left-wingers can ever live with me.
Is there such a thing as an anarcho-fascist? I'm sure they'll...
No. No, there isn't, because you can't have fascism and anarchy, despite what Altazai thinks.
Oh man, I don't even know what his deal is politically. I know he kind of
vote Biden.
That's it. I think a lot of Alcazai is just role playing. I think he believes a lot of the stuff he says, but I think half of it's just kind of a trolly role playing front. Like if you kind of push him into a corner and actually kind of got him to be serious, I'm sure he'd be more of a just kind of a moderate in most issues. Like he said, I remember he told me once he would still be a conservative if the conservatives weren't if they weren't as populist as they were. But
well, I mean, the issue with Altazai's version of conservatism is it doesn't conserve anything. It's literally just progressivism, but slower.
I've heard that line so many times from...
It's true.
It really depends on who you're talking about. I mean, there are...
What's the difference between the Republicans after Eisenhower and, like, the Democrats after the New Deal? It's just the speed on how they rush things in.
Well, I think that that's essentially the Mencius-Smolbug argument, that history is constantly moving in the favor of progressivism for various reasons, and I have a couple of problems with that presupposition, if only just because history is not something clean where party lines stay the same for long periods of time. I mean, there's a book I've been meaning to read called 1920, The Year of Five Presidents. And the case the historian makes in that book is that essentially the political parties did not mean the same thing 100 years ago that they do now. So I think that there's a little bit of...
but Eisenhower wasn't the 1920s, and Eisenhower's ideology still very much even affects a sizable minority of Republicans today.
I don't know if I would call Eisenhower a pure Republican, though. I mean, a lot of the reason he was elected was just because he was a general. Like, that was primarily his appeal. He was the guy that ran the United Forces in the European campaign.
Well, he was also a prominent member of the New Right during that time period.
I'm not familiar with this.
That's why they coalesced behind him. The New Right is the Republican Party movement that was somewhat started by William F. Buckley, as opposed to the old right of Robert Taft.
Okay, I appreciate the clarification on that, because New Right now means something very different than New Right of the 50s means. And I think the
I don't even call the New Right that is now the New Right. I just call it the populist right.
The best word I've heard for it is the dissident right. I think that's at least because I think so many of those people are they like playing kind of the bad guy. They like playing on the edge. They like being edgy guys, and you know what I mean. Like they kind of play up the image of being like outside of the system, that kind of stuff. But
yeah, even though populists are inside the system, which is why they will not succeed.
Well, it depends on which ones. I mean, do you think the 50s New Right is the same thing as the establishment right now, or what do you think?
Yes.
So you would not. So you'd say you're against the 50s New Right then?
I'm against the 50s New Right, and I'm against the populist right.
You're against both, or just the one?
Yeah, I'm against both. because I'm old, right?
Okay. Would you consider
Like,
yourself
I'm
alt-right,
very
or?
much yeah, I consider myself old right, not alt-right.
I misheard you. I was like, oh, he just
no,
came out as
I'm not
alt-right on air. Great.
No. And besides, alt-right doesn't even mean anything. It
Well-
just means you're not a neocon,
Well,
because alternative. That's
well, that's
basically
the
all it
thing.
means.
That you're getting in. There's the battle of words right there. It's like, well, what does it mean? I think in a descriptivist definition, people mean something when they say alt-right, but just the term alternative right does not mean.
When they say alt-right, they usually mean to call that person a Nazi. So.
Well, alt-right circa 2015 probably meant something different than it means post 2017, when the movement kind of came out in kind of balkanized around the white nationalist coalition, and then died, and then came back again, and then kind of fell into irrelevancy, and now there's
coalition is supporting Biden.
Exactly.
Have fun, Altazai. You're alt-right now.
Well, he'd probably find a way to turn that around. I mean, Alcazai is Alcazai. He can make anything work for him.
Jesus, he's the Donald Trump of Globe Twitter. Spinning everything.
That is great. Tell him I'm gonna text him that later. I saw you guys fighting on Twitter about the Lauren Chen's IQ question, and I got very close to sending you my.
I really don't care. Like, IQ is determined with the same things that determine economic success. So you can go and gauge a country's economic success somewhat on its IQ.
Oh, I tried to send you the crap post video I made a couple months back, where I pull my copy of Bell Curve off the shelf and say, "Oh boy, time to become a racist."
Yeah, I saw you send me that earlier this year, and I just died laughing.
I want to create
time to become a racist.
Yeah, I mean, if you actually read the book's about how society should try to find a better way, should try to create better ways to build up people that are low IQ individuals. And the only reason that term is controversial is because no one in America is comfortable with the idea of being considered dumb. And I completely understand why, because it's a huge social stigma. It's like, oh, you're dumb, you're not worth it, you're not, people shouldn't be around you, people don't take your ideas seriously. So in a system as competitive as ours, you don't want the term low IQ labeled on your head. But from a societal perspective, I think there's something to the idea of to Charles Murray's idea that you need to take care of people that are under-equipped to function in an economy that's specifically designed to work around high cognitive jobs. You can't make low IQ accountants. You can't make low IQ doctors. But it's really,
okay, then stop having every job need a college degree.
Well, yeah, and it's also not a good thing when all of these people, the only jobs they can work are service sector jobs. If you were born into life with a low IQ, that is not your fault, and that means you've been essentially deemed by your own limitations as someone who's only really functional in the marketplace as the lowest possible job, which means you're probably going to be working at Walmart, and you're going to be working at McDonald's, you're going to be working at Starbucks.
Well, even then, those jobs, if you put in enough hours, are enough to go and support yourself.
You can barely afford a cheap apartment on that. Maybe you could afford like a $500 apartment.
Yourself.
Maybe you could afford like a low-priced government-assisted housing, like maybe for like $500 a month, but that'd be a stretch, and you'd need you'd need at least 2 supporters in the house to do that, and so I think that argument is. I think there's an argument to be had about how IQ functions in American politics, but the alt-right debate is just so poisoned it because they immediately just go to, oh, people dumb, they should stop breeding. I'm like, oh, let's not go there.
I mean, then there's the argument of if you have such a terrible life, why do you want to go and breed and give other people this terrible life?
But that's the idiocracy argument. I don't like that. I mean, the thing about being alive is that having kids is one of the most meaningful things you can do. And telling the whole court into the population, "Oh, you're too dumb. We're not going to let you live a meaningful life, so other people can live better, meaningful lives statistically." That's whatever statistical evidence that says that would be a useful argument. I would say that is an immoral argument, even from a Christian perspective, from a moral perspective. In most ways, I would say that's not the way society should be oriented, unless you have like a China situation where the population is literally too large to function. We aren't at a point where the idiocracy situation is happening. I don't particularly like that conceptualization either way.
Yeah, I guess, but I don't know.
I'm probably like the one person in the world that's like really doesn't like idiocracy. So.
Well, I'm also not a person who likes society to go and be molded to go and help anyone. I think that it should be equal opportunity, like being harsh on everybody. Because I don't think anyone should have an easy time just because they're born a certain way.
Well, you're going to get some of that just naturally. I mean, inequality just kind of happens by happenstance of the fact that people function differently in different ways. And so it's very hard to come up with the kind of progressive or alternatively like paleocon society where you have some groups of people that you build up entirely and discourage the rest. It's very hard to make that work, and there's the reason most systems that try to do that don't do particularly well. I mean, obviously there are certain things you could do that would help foster families statistically. Like you could create tax credits and stuff like that, but I don't know. I don't think you foster society through any sort of government means.
Well, yeah, I know that you don't foster society through government means.
Well, I also know you're not a paleocon, so I mean, yeah, a lot of the neo-reactionaries they're kind of upper right quarter of the political spectrum, and they start getting into like full like socialist territory at times. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, we should have the government take over the entire economy and use it to serve our purposes, not the progressive ones. And I'm like, no, that's not a good idea either. I don't like this idea.
Why do you need a government? Just like set up some community somewhere.
I mean,
boom, you can have it be whatever you want.
I hate to cuck out on the statism question, but I think the state's a better alternative than anarchy. I don't know. I have a ton of anarchist friends on Twitter, and I hear them make this the state has no legitimate function argument all the time, and I'm like, I don't know, I think there's a couple things I like.
Such as?
The library, the roads.
Many of... Yeah, here's the thing.
Military.
If
I just keep saying roads over and over again because it's a sticking point.
Okay, I can go and show you how they built roads in the U.S. before the Department of Transportation.
I'm sure it's possible.
That was a mainly privatized affair.
I'm sure that's a thing. I just, as someone...
as for libraries, I'll just respond with Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller.
Well, there you go. My general policy on life is that the best solutions are found in the tension between different kinds of different societal structures. I think that the tension between liberty and the state is a good thing, and then when you don't have that tension, you get the extremes that come with both sides. Is that fair?
Well, I mean, what's wrong with extreme liberty?
Libertinism, moral chaos, Vikings running around pillaging people.
There's a difference between liberty and being libertine. Because being libertine, to me, requires a state to go and subsidize.
Well, if you want an anarchist society, you need a very strong social functionary. You need some sort of
that's
families. Or like if that's the thing. Like if a bunch of anarchists decided like, oh, we're gonna go off on our own into the middle of the Rocky Mountains and we're gonna form a collective, and we're just gonna do our own thing and we're gonna be farmers and we're gonna have very strong family bonds because we all come from the same moral system. We're all religious. We're all whatever you want to call it. Like that, I think you could make that work. I just don't see that working society-wide because I think there are too many people that just don't have the will to do that sort of thing, and they don't
Well,
have...
those people are going to be the ones who die homeless.
Oh, gosh. That's brutal, man.
You have the willpower or you die.
We have a social Darwinist here, people.
Yes. That's what anarchy is.
Oh, man.
Anarchy does not favor moral weaklings.
But Jesus says the meek will be something. I'm forgetting the quote.
Yes, meek will inherit the earth, but the meek are not weaklings either.
Oh, well. I don't know. This is the problem with the state question, because I'm like, it's very hard to make a pure argument for why the state should exist in the anarchist framework. I mean, I get it. I mean, I basically was an objectivist for a couple of years, and I kind of had that very libertarian mindset, where it's like, the state shouldn't do anything. But I'm like, I don't know, I'm an adult now. There are certain things, I don't mind certain aspects of it, just because, I mean, if the government is designed specifically just to make mediocre solutions available to large numbers of people, I get that, and I can handle the amount of that. That's something I'm willing to tolerate it. Just because I think that it's better to have something for people that struggle than nothing, but there's a huge argument to be had there, and you know what I mean?
That's what charity is for, because I'm not an objectivist.
Well, yeah, I think charity does serve a function too, but it's hard to see exactly where the effects of it come in. Like, we have a pretty large charity mechanism in society right now, but it's hard to really tell just how much actually does in the long run. You know what I mean? And I'm very much of the you will always have the poorest amongst you mindset. I think in some ways you kind of have to just factor the fact that the poor will always exist into whatever system you're going to live in.
Yeah, well, sure, there's an argument that that you can go and judge a society with how it treats its worst off individuals. But at the same time, I don't think it's moral to go and take all of the richest money to go and pay for poor people.
Oh no, I don't think it is either. I think that's
which is what welfare is in the long run.
If it would, do you think it'd be fair if there was like a flat tax and it wasn't specifically something designed to target the wealthy?
Well, I mean, I'm just like Ron Paul. I'm in favor of a flat tax of 0%.
Well, do you think there's any role for taxes, or are you full taxation is theft?
Taxation is indeed a form of theft, but I would be okay if taxes were voluntary.
I would say
once a year you get a letter from the government asking for funds, and then you can go and donate however much funds you want and say where those funds go. But at the same time, if you don't donate a cent, well, you don't have priority for 911 and you can't use the post office. I think that's fair.
I think for me, the best way to handle the taxes would be taxes on government goods like the post office, taxes on interstate commerce, and taxes on general sales taxes. I think the income tax and the income tax and property tax should probably just be totally dissolved, except maybe for local property taxes, since that pays for schools. I think any federal level
I don't want the government in schools, because I've seen what's happened with that.
Well, yeah, obviously abolish the Department of Education for all I care. It's not useful. And make this a state level thing. I think that's obvious. There's no purpose in having. Let's not make this the weakness something that applies to the entire system.
Well, even then, why have it just be a state thing? You can go and have primary and secondary schools instead associate themselves with different universities in the region, and then they have curriculums that are more tailor-made towards that university's needs.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that necessarily. Do you think that there's any role for public schools, or how do you think that would?
Yeah, there's the only role that there is for public schools is right now because private schools do not have very good means of helping people with learning disorders. But as soon as private schools are better with helping people with learning disorders, then there's not really a need for public schools. They're in fact even more expensive than private schools per person.
There are a handful of private schools that specifically cater to people with disabilities. I know there's like a college for the elementary school for the blind up in Wisconsin, and I know that they do a lot.
Yeah,
of, but obviously something like that.
I mean, different learning disabilities like autism.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure they have specialty schools for those too. I just never heard of them, but I wouldn't surprise me if there were specialty ones, but I would imagine they probably are somewhat expensive. And people, obviously, if you're not in a state where you're within easy drive of that, it's not terribly useful to you. Like we don't live in Britain. We don't want to ship all of our children away every 9 months out of the year.
I mean, for me, in the long run, I'm pro homeschool, so because I think that parents should have a high degree of control on what their children learn.
It's amazing how much
their children belong to their parents, not the state.
It's amazing how much that issue is just kind of escalated in the past few months for not unobvious reasons. I mean, it's like almost every, like when I talk to people, especially young women my age, almost every single one of them says, "Yeah, I'm homeschooling. I'm not putting them in public schools," and I've tried.
Yeah, I mean, that's what my girlfriend and I have actually talked about because we're pretty serious in a relationship, and we've talked about if we have kids, what we would do for schooling. And I want them homeschooled, and she's agreeing with me now. She used to prefer private school instead.
It depends on the private school. I mean, I did my first I did preschool and my first 3 years of education at a Lutheran school, and then I moved to private, and then I moved to public.
I've always been in public school, and it was not the best experience. Even though, well, you've seen the school I've went to. It's a really good school.
I have mixed feelings about it because I think public school probably was good for me. Not necessarily in terms of the things I learned, because I was a friggin' lazy B- student that didn't really kind of try all that hard.
Yeah.
But I was also an extremely socially incompetent kid growing up, and I think being forced to go through the ringer of public school probably was better for me socially in the long run. Just because it kind of it let me be socialized around people my age, and it let me kind of see what it was going to be like to function in the adult world. And I don't know if I would have gotten it if I just jumped right into, if I didn't homeschool my entire life and jumped right into a career or college.
Well, at the same time, was that learned at school, or was it learned with hanging out with your friends after school?
Well, I only would have met my friends through school. Like, I didn't go out of my way to talk to almost anyone in high school. So the friends I made were people that were just people I met randomly in class and struck up a conversation with all of a sudden. It was like, oh, we happen to be friends. We'll hang out occasionally, and that's how it happened. Like, I don't know if I would have organically made the kind of friends I did in high school if I didn't have that immediate exposure to all these people. But that's just me, though. I think that
for me, I was introduced to my friends through friends I already knew, and I knew those friends first out of school before I knew them in school.
Yeah, and I would imagine it's different for someone who has like a really rigorous religious education, because a lot of, like, if you have a really good church, you're probably going to be surrounded by people that have kids too, and you can introduce kids through that, and that's a good way to get young people around. But just being me, growing up in the thing I did, I'm glad I went to public education, because I would have wound up completely different had I not. But that's a personal, subjective thing. And nowadays, I totally get why people are pulling their kids out and being like, yeah, these, you don't trust what they're teaching your kids. You don't trust why they're teaching their kids certain things.
Yeah, I mean, I really was always uncomfortable with how they did health education for my school district. Like, they started way too early, like 5th grade.
Mine did 5th grade too, but they didn't go super graphic at the time. They didn't start getting like graphic and details until maybe sophomore year of high school. How
For
graphic?
me, it was 7th grade when they started getting graphic, but I think it was just because my health teacher was weird.
Okay, that's gross, but
yeah,
like I remember
it was not a fun experience.
Did your high school have the STD day where you have to watch a PowerPoint presentation of like genitals infected by various STDs?
Yeah, I called in sick that day.
It's so sick.
I didn't bother going to school.
Oh gosh, that's the worst. That was the worst day. Like, what are you gonna do? But
I mean, I even got a C on that test afterwards by just answering B on all of the questions.
What the heck? That's insane. I don't know. Like it really.
Like, I didn't care.
So yeah, I'm agnostic on the question of public school. I mean, it really just depends on what kind of kid you are and what you need growing up. Like, but it seems like it's whoever. If I ever end up getting married, whoever I end up marrying is probably gonna request homeschool, and I'm like, well, okay, but I don't know which one of us is doing it because I don't have a career right now, and I don't know who the person. And every single Christian girl I married is like, I don't want to work. I'm just gonna stay at home. I'm like, good for you. You know what I mean? What is your girlfriend thinking of?
Well, I mean,
is your girlfriend career into it yet, or does she want to stay home?
Her career choice allows her to stay at home because she wants to go and basically knit and design fashion stuff, and she can do all of that at home.
Yeah.
Doesn't even require meetings.
Okay, that's convenient for her.
Yeah. And hey, that means that now I don't have to go and constantly buy more clothes. She can make them. I don't buy her yarn. It's cheaper.
There you go. I mean, I know some people that go full like, oh, I buy all my clothes at Goodwill. And I'm like, that's one way to handle it, but
it's a pretty decent way of handling it, actually. Like, it's always just to get the maximum use out of clothing.
Yeah.
And they disinfect it.
I would hope.
I worked at Goodwill before.
Okay.
They're pretty good at disinfecting.
I will take your word on that. I will take your word to that.
It's safe. Don't worry.
Please enjoy this nice pair of shorts. It was dipped in AIDS blood prior to being given to you.
The person who owned this was sacrificed to Moloch by the Democrats.
It reminds me of a line from The Critic where it's like, well, as a famous elitist, I of course worship Pan, the goat god, but I appreciate you coming to me with your proselytization. Did we have a topic we were discussing a few minutes ago? Because it feels like we've just been rolling like Bluto. What was that?
Like, I think we were talking about the role of the state, which I'm always going to be of the opinion that if you privatize all of the roles of the state, you will not lose efficiency. You will only gain efficiency, if anything.
Like I told Alcazar recently that he asked me what my political ideology was, and I basically told him I think every other political ideology is probably not functional. What's the word for that? I'm becoming a complete cynic as an adult, where I'm just like, if I can imagine a way that the ideology is probably going to break down, it probably will break down that way. And when I think about anarchism, I just think that you'd have to have some sort of way of fostering culture without the government. Otherwise, you're kind of thinking a little too utopian.
That's the thing. I'm of the opinion that any anarchist society which would last more than a month is going to be a socially conservative one.
Which I know you're I know you call yourself a paleo-libertarian, so I know you're of the
Well, paleo-lib, australib. I'm pretty. I use quite a few labels because I just haven't found one that really works 100%.
Yeah, same.
I mean, I I use some of Mencius Moldbug's work in my own personal philosophy, so it's kind of hard to find a label that works with that. But it's only the works that mesh well with libertarianism. Like, I'm not going to go full-on authoritarian and nuke cities for no reason.
Does he say that at some point? I've read a few of his things, and
he called cities IQ grinders, where you should just send in immigrants.
What?
Basically, go full Singapore.
What the heck?
Either that or it's Nick Land, which Nick Land is so strange. I follow him on Twitter just because of the esoteric shitposts he makes.
You know, the thing about... Does Mencius Moldbug actually have a Twitter account? I heard at one point that the Bronze Age pervert was actually... Huh?
Moldbug? Moldbug, I don't know if he has a Twitter account, but Nick Land does.
Okay. Who's Bronze Age pervert? Because I keep seeing neo-reactionaries post about him.
I have no idea.
Okay.
I'm not a neo-reactionary.
Well, you're neo-reactionary adjacent, which... That means you're fascist by progressive logic.
That means I'm cancelled.
Yeah, if you mention Mencius Moldbug, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
I mean, I've read a couple of his things, and half of it just seems loony. I mean, he has all these amazing insights into things, but then you find out what his actual positive solutions to things are, and you're like...
Well, that's why I don't use his solutions. I use his insights.
Like, I think prescribing the idea of progressive thought as a kind of religious experience is a good way to orient it, but I don't know. At times, I find him to be way too cynical to be useful. I mean, I'm also... I find myself very nostalgic for the new right level kind of conservatism, mostly just because I'm not that radical of a person in my politics. So I just sitting here like, oh, I miss the good old days when everyone just complained about Obama. It was so simple back then.
I mean, usually whenever I think of the song with which we can turn back time in it, I always just remember when my friend would always like post that on a high school group chat, but in the background it would always be pictures of apartheid South Africa.
Oh my God. Remember when Bush was president? Everyone thought he was literally Hitler, and everything felt like it was on fire then. And now it's just like that feels normal. That's what normal was like when Bush was president.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a libertarian, so I don't really like that normal.
Well, yeah, but I don't know. I'd like if we could get an actual presidential administration in the next few years. That's like, whoever wins this upcoming election, I just like a president that's normal, and that doesn't have like insane opinions one way or the other. Just kind of a boring, vanilla way for president for a few years. You know what I mean? Why can't we get
our rights are sold away?
Why can't we get a Coolidge? Where are all the Calvin Coolidges? Is that like, would that have to be like someone like Rand Paul?
Actually, Calvin Coolidge caused quite a bit of chaos contemporarily, so Trump kind of is Calvin Coolidge.
Oh gosh, that
just with talking instead of saying literally nothing.
Well,
you know that
go.
one Calvin Coolidge story, right, at the party? Some person said, I bet that I can go and get you to say more than 3 words at the party, and he just said, you lose, and never said another word for the rest of the party. Chad Calvin Coolidge.
That's chill. Good job.
The Virgin Woodrow Wilson versus the Chad Calvin Coolidge. Someone needs to make this meme.
Is it considered boomer cringe to still talk about Woodrow Wilson as the fascist of American politics?
Because it's boomer cringe to say that.
Yeah, I kind of,
because wartime socialism isn't fascism.
Yeah, that's more my opinion. I mean, do you think that Bush's stuff could have been considered wartime socialism? Because I kind of thought when I was younger, I kind of associated what was happening in that kind of mindset, but
well, were the means of production somewhat put under the control of the military? Because that's what happened in World Wars I and II.
Does the military-industrial complex count?
When I mean under the control of the military, I mean civilian companies make exactly what the military wants and only what the military wants.
That's kind of what happens, though. I mean, the guys that make the Abrams tanks, like, they have like an entire congressional district kind of under their thumb. There's a reason we still pump tanks out, even though we don't need tanks right now. It's because they don't want to shut down the Abrams factory.
We pump tanks out to go and export them, since Egypt ordered another 1,000.
Well, good for them, but we don't.
Why Egypt needs 1,000 Abrams tanks? I have no clue.
I don't know. Are they going to try to invade Israel again? Is that going to be a thing?
No, they're actually a Israeli ally.
Quote unquote. I have a friend who told me that like Middle Eastern peace agreements technically don't mean anything. Technically abdicate after about a decade. So I have no idea if they would still be considered an ally or not.
I don't know. With what's going on in the Middle East now,
it really depends on how much you would consider the country a theocracy. I mean, is the country being controlled by its imams?
Israel?
Well, not Israel. I mean Egypt.
Oh, Egypt? No.
Okay, if it's still a secular government, then yeah,
the Muslim Brotherhood is back to being banned.
Okay, so yeah, then Egypt is probably not going to pull any crap. Although I could see why they'd want one of the 1,000 tanks.
Even the UAE and Qatar and Bahrain are being friendly with Israel now.
That happened like a month ago, right? That was Trump's big announcement. But the weird thing about Qatar is that Qatar is like the most industrialized country in the at least the one.
You know, it's also the largest natural gas provider on the planet.
Well, there you go. But it's one of those things where it's they make so much money there. I would not consider them like a Muslim state in a theocratic sense, unless I don't know about their government situation, but I always associate them as just being like this. It's like the guy that wins the lottery and buys the world's largest tower. You know
ironically enough, the government of Qatar is actually more friendly to Iran than they are to the Saudis.
That's interesting. I mean, do Iran and Saudi Arabia get along at all?
Shia, so that's why.
Do Iran and Saudi Arabia get along at all, or do they just hate each other?
No, they're in a Cold War.
Okay, like
they've been in a Cold War ever since the '60s, actually.
Well, they wouldn't have an easy ability to land troops on one another, so they'd have to probably go through Iraq if they wanted to actually do anything.
Oh no, Iran actually has a pretty sizable navy because of Russian and Chinese warships being sold to them.
Thanks, Russia. We need more.
Well, they did that in the '90s when they had no money.
Oh, well, there you go.
Like they even gave T-80s to South Korea.
Well, okay, that's not terrible.
Well, it's terrible for them. That was their best main battle tank.
Well, to South Korea, I don't want Russia being built up.
I think that Russia is a better ally for us than Germany. So
I don't know if
because at least the Russians won't be complaining about our cultural views. The Germans do only that, and then like sell random weapons to terrorists and blame us.
Germany is complicated. Let's just put it that way.
Germany needs to be destroyed. Germany to lend us.
We have to abolish the Fourth Progressive Reich.
Yes, the Prague Reich. I should make that a Twitter hashtag.
The Prague Reich.
Hashtag Prague Reich.
I mean, if Germany stopped being, they kind of become the biggest progressive holdout in the European Union just because they're such a huge economy.
Well, there's also Sweden.
Well, if Sweden was off on its own being the little tiny socialist republic, I don't think most of Europe would care. But because Germany is at the center of Europe, and because it's the third largest economy on the planet, and because they're so central to the European Union's ideology, when they go full progressive, the rest of the EU is going to go progressive. And I think that's a lot of why so much of the EU's politics are the way they are, is because Germany is so paranoid after what happened in World War II that they can't abide by the possibility that anything like that would ever happen again. So they've just gone full progressive, and they just make that like the center of their ideology. Like, I can't imagine Angela Merkel being a successful politician outside of Germany. Like, she's so annoying and so intolerable.
Yeah, now even the Germans hate her.
But they still keep voting for her. I mean,
yeah.
when was the Le Pen race in France? when they tried running the Le Pen.
Oh yeah,
Like,
and Macron got elected.
yeah, I mean, there's a reason why they can't elect populists in Europe. It's because there's the progressive status quo is so growing out of these countries is so overwhelming. You just can't get that to function there. I mean, I think it probably will happen, especially if another country breaks out of the European Union. If a major country did, I think you probably would see a major change. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, even post quote unquote post Brexit, Britain still can't seem to shake off that progressive tinge. They even with the Tories in power, even they defeated the Labour Party massively. They just can't break that they can't break that control. You'd think there'd be more political will to kind of fight back against like the anti-free speech stuff in England, but it doesn't seem to be. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's because all of the more conservative parties in Europe are not parties that actually try to conserve things. They're just parties of the establishment.
That's what I've heard. So the Tory party kind of
If you want change, if you want change in Europe, you actually have to vote for the left-wing parties, and it's always going to be negative change.
Yeah. Or, I mean, it always seems like the parties that seem to pop up too tend to get a little too fashy. Like, what was that? What was Nate Griffin's party in Britain that popped up, and then we went on television, and then everyone realized, oh, we shouldn't vote for this guy. What was that? What was his party? Do you remember what we're talking about?
I don't really pay attention to British politics. British Night tells me what's going on, and then I complain.
Have him tell you about
Nate. Not the 51st state yet.
Have him tell you about Nate Griffin and his him falling apart on national TV. That's a fun story. But yeah,
boy.
I mean that's the thing. Like it seems like most of Europe is just the difference between liberalism and progressivism. And when you do find right-wing stuff, it's always kind of it gets a little too fashy at times. And
I mean, you've seen my takes on Europeans.
Which
basically
ones?
Just calling them second-class Americans. It's colonial subjects, I think.
I mean,
we colonized them.
America has immense soft power over Europe. Like, if we could actually get like a conservative cultural revolution going, it probably would bleed into Europe too. I mean, because our ideas tend to be the ones that flow out everywhere else. I mean, that's why there's a freaking BLM movement in Britain, even though there's no serious police brutality
there's no
happening.
Black people in Britain.
Well, there are black people in Britain, but there's no.
Yeah, I know. I'm making a joke.
Watch Doctor Who sometimes. There's like every single like side character in that show is black, but it's there's no serious police brutality culture in Britain, and yet they still have BLM. Which, what does that even mean? Like, how does that work? Just get a bunch of white guys that go out and, like, sit on an airport runway for an hour and then get arrested. And you're like, why did you do that? Because we have to stop the oppression. I'm like, you're a bunch of white liberals. What are you doing in Britain? But American ideas, they don't stay in America. Like, that's...
Well, yeah, we're really good at exporting them because we have archaic old people in Hollywood.
Well, this might be a good place to jump into your Parler tweet a couple days ago. You basically laid out a case for why this isn't going to be the century of China. Could you go into that? Because I mean, the second.
Oh yeah, sure. Let me go and pull up that.
Because the consensus right now is that what's going to happen in the next decade or so, or decade, 2 decades.
China's just suffering from entropy right now.
Well, everyone says China's on the rise. China's taking over. China's social credit system is going to become the new normal, and everyone says that America's going to.
Oh, it might.
I mean, America's going to decline in the next.
China's going to collapse.
In what sense? As an economy, as a country? What would it?
Well, economically, yeah, they are going to, because Northeast China, where much of their industry is located, is going to run out of water within 5 to 10 years.
Oh.
So unless they win a war with India, which is the only other country which has any of their water sources coming in, well, they're fucked. And
Okay.
if they go to war with India, they go to war with Australia, Japan, South Korea, and the United States.
Yeah, I mean, good grief. I mean, when did they? Like 2 months ago, they put all those troops on the border, right? Just because they wanted to kind of start they're hedging their bets a little bit. But
Yeah, and I actually have a friend who's in the U.S. Pacific Fleet on one of the aircraft carriers, and he basically said, yeah, they were on short deployment notice.
oh shoot.
So, yeah, I'm not going to say which carrier because A, I don't know, and B, I don't want to get him in trouble.
Well, yeah, I have a friend in the Air Force, and he's not allowed to talk about any of the crap that goes down near him. So I completely understand why, because if he says anything, it's a leak. It's gonna get people hurt, and obviously, but
yeah. Ah, yes.
Beyond
all
the water,
Chinese intelligence assets who follow me will know this.
I got followed by like 3 Korean pro-life Christian accounts today that I'm 90% certain are bots, and I am like, what's happening here? Why are these people following me?
Yeah.
Anyway, is beyond just the water issue, what else do you think is not in their favor right now? Because
well, also look at the fact that the Chinese Communist Party, all of its legitimacy is hinged on economic growth. And that economic growth, which they built all of their legitimacy on, is no longer going to be past 6%. In fact, it is now at around 3%.
oh my.
So in order to go and reboost that, they have to build entire cities which no one will live in. And where are they going to get that money?
That's a good question. I mean, I remember I read a PJ workbook a while back, and he made the interesting case that the one problem China's going to have is that all of the money they're bringing in is foreign currency, and that's not useful to them because when Japan did the same thing in the 70s, they built up their industry and they got flooded with American currency, but they don't use American currency, so they had to just take all the money and reinvest it in America so they could get more, and what ends up happening is eventually it all falls apart and all the money ends up flowing back to the country where it came from. Do you think that's kind of what we're looking at with China, where all the money is just going to end up coming back to us once the bubble bursts?
Well, us in Europe, and then it's going to happen to India more down the road and in Africa. Because this is the only way that they can rapidly industrialize.
Well, it's kind of seemed like part of their strategy was that they were going to move all their industrialization to East Africa and just import all their stuff from there, and then essentially make all the people in Africa do slave labor that they don't want to do in China. Like, do you think that?
Well, which even then, as soon as the yuan is no longer valuable, do you really think that the Belt and Road Initiative is going to be honored anymore by those East African nations? Like, the Chinese Navy is incapable of deploying to East Africa on short notice.
Yeah, I can't. Like, I could not imagine them going to war with like Somalia.
I mean, if they want to, it frees us up.
The Chinese.
It's good for the U.S.
The Sino-Somali War, the Great Sino-Somali War.
The Sino-Somali split.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting case. I've heard a lot of people make the China as a paper tiger argument, but I'm worried that it's more resilient than we're giving it credit for, and if it is, then we're in big trouble. Like if China's
here's another problem, because people always say that China's resilient because of its birth rate. That birth rate is collapsing. It is actually right now lower than the United States' birth rate.
Why am I the only one that's not worried about birth rate statistics? Like, half the countries on the planet right now are complaining about overpopulation, and at the same time they're talking about low birth rates, and I'm like, don't both those problems fix each other?
Well, I mean, Russia and China within the next 30 years are going to demographically collapse. And demographically collapsing countries are usually very desperate and will try and take land from one another. Hence why China's now claiming a lot of Siberia as their land. So there might even be a war with Russia for China.
Oh man, that'd be nuts.
I mean, it eliminates 2 obstacles for us, and then we get to be friendly with the Russians again for the first time since the Civil War.
Wow. I mean, that'd be...
So for me, win-win.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, really, the best thing America can hope for is any situation that keeps America still as the sole superpower, because last thing we want is China becoming the world superpower while America goes through its collapse. I mean, you saw that guy on Twitter.
I don't even think America's going to collapse. We're just going to become isolationist again.
I don't know though, because I have two simultaneous thoughts about America right now. One is that our fringes are getting to the point where they simply cannot be in the same space together. The far left and the far right they can't share space. You can't keep them in the same area anymore. They're going to start brawling. I mean, something like 40% of Americans right now are saying, like, oh, it's okay. It's if our side loses, it's okay when they get violent. And that's both sides. And so... on the other hand...
Here's the thing, though. The same thing happened in the 60s.
But here's my counterpoint to that. No one who says the Civil War is coming factors in the normie question. No one factors in the 100 million boomers that do not want to go to civil war with their neighbors, that just want to grill, darn it. And that's not something specifically rooted in just, like, white middle class. That's every middle class. Every single middle class normie just wants to go about their day and do their job and go to church and hang out with their friends, and their friends probably aren't racially segregated. They probably have friends that are multi-ethnic. A lot of these normies, they're just like, oh, we have our neighbors down the street are black. They're great. I don't want to go to fight with them. Why would I want to race war with them? Like, the normie question is something that the radicals never take into account. I mean, there's a reason why politics goes the way it does in America. It's because the normies just do not have they have no quarrel in populist questions. And I think if anything is going to save America, it's the people that just want to go about their daily lives and want nothing to do with the revolution.
Yeah. Well, that's actually the main reason why I don't really think that a civil war is going to happen. Because as soon as the radical left or radical right tries to do a civil war, the cops are going to be unleashed. Then they're all shot or imprisoned.
Yeah, at this rate, at the moment, it looks kind of like Biden's going to win the election, and at that rate, I don't think the far left would riot. But if Trump did win and the far left just completely lost it, they wouldn't make any friends. Like, the far left...
You see, I think Kamala Harris just screwed over Biden.
I don't know, though, because my dad told me about the statistics coming out of last week's the debate from like a week or two ago, and apparently a lot of incumbent Republicans have just dropped. Like, especially the worst stuff is down ticket. Like, there's some speculation that the Republicans are going to lose the Senate and the House. So even if Trump does win, it's probably not going to be a good win. It's probably going to be one of those things where a lot of Congress is going to go lame duck, and there's going to be an enormous amount of interference. But yeah, and regardless, I think the far left only is going to be able to make their worldview work if they can keep the consensus-making apparatus functional. Like the only reason society continually moves leftward is just because they control rhetoric. They control language. They control culture.
Well, yeah, I mean, Tito and Brennan Moldbug, they control the Cathedral.
Yeah, but was one thing I'm not certain about the Cathedral concept. Is Cathedral inherently progressive, or is the Cathedral just controlled by the progressives? Is it because I know
the Cathedral is just controlled by the progressives?
Because I know it's functionally
However, it has also always been progressive.
What's stopping a conservative from controlling the consensus-making apparatus aside from just the logistical aspects?
Inertia.
Okay. I mean, because at some point...
also the sheer amount of people involved. Like, part of the Cathedral is every single journalist, so unless you purge every single journalist, journalism is going to be against the conservatives. And I'm not in the mood of murdering journalists.
Well, is the Cathedral, would it be considered progressive or neoliberal? Because I think that because as far as I can tell, the far left does not think it controls anything. Like, I was talking to some progressives recently, and they were screaming like, "We don't have any power. We don't have the ability to run the country. We can't get our president in. We just every time we run someone like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, they get
every single corporation and news outlet is on their side."
I mean, I agree with that,
power.
but they
Progressives institutionally do have power, and the best way to go and combat the cathedral is for conservatives to make their own cathedral.
It's soft power. It's not hard power like in the executive branch at the moment. It's just the fact that they have the culture and that they can foster the opinions they want in the long run. They just the far left just doesn't have the ability to push anything through executive power right now, because anytime they run someone like Bernie Sanders, the country is like, he's a little nutty. Why are you trying to elect this mummified communist? But I mean, I think that's probably the biggest.
Oh shit! It's Comrade Tutankhamun.
Gosh, I mean, that's probably the left's biggest weakness, is that when they're honest and when they actually run progressive candidates, much to the chagrin of Kyle Kulinski, they lose because the cultural consensus is neoliberal.
This is just like boiling a frog. You make the water temperature go up slowly. You do not do it quickly and noticeably.
So, would you say the cathedral is neoliberal or progressive then?
I would say it's progressive, but the neoliberals unwittingly serve the progressives.
I'm not totally sure, because it seems like if Biden wins, it seems like there's going to be a decided effort to try to rein in the far left to some degree. Like, I don't know how long that works in the long run, but
I don't really think so, because under the Obama administration, they didn't really try to rein in the far left. In fact, they kind of fostered that movement for 8 years.
But the thing about the Obama administration was always that he had one foot in and 1 foot out of radicalism. He was kind of the George Bush neoliberal status quo, fighting wars, just kind of government as normal stuff. But I mean, there was always that other foot that was just kind of pushing things a little bit farther culturally, while the government just kind of stayed the same. I mean, obviously there were major policy changes like Obamacare, but I always thought the radical stuff was...
Well, that's the thing, though. With the Biden administration, we basically have to look at Kamala Harris. And I think Kamala Harris is going to be more of a foot in for progressivism than neoliberalism. Because she would find that to be strategically advantageous.
She is such a political chameleon, I would not be surprised if she tried. Like, I don't think she's an honest progressive. I think she's probably just one of those people that her whole entire life goal was just to become the president. And I get the sense
I mean, she literally slept with people to get elected.
Yeah.
So
I don't believe there's an honest political bone in her body. I think she's almost entirely astroturfed and artificial. And she probably would say a lot of that stuff just to get into office, or to keep office if she really wanted to get power. But she's as Machiavellian as they get. She's a power freak. So
100%, but for you to go and convince the far left to support you, you have to actually act far left.
But I also think
there's a slippery slope.
But I also think there's an authenticity problem that the far left is going to sense, because the far left knows when someone is authentically on their side, and I think that someone who's an ex-cop who has her background, they're just going to take one look at her and be like, this is a narc. This isn't one of us.
I think you're giving the far left a little bit too much credit, since I do not see them as very intelligent.
Well, I think they're instinctual. I mean, that's the thing about authenticity as a concept. It's not really something intellectual. It's just kind of a feel. Like, it's the difference between, like, getting McDonald's and getting an actual meal. Like, you're putting food into your stomach, but you know what the real thing is. And I think that's kind of true of someone like Kamala Harris, where it's like, or even on our side, like, Jeb Bush isn't really... a lot of these guys are not really conservatives. They're just kind of instinctual politicians and Wonder Bread types that get up on stage because they want a job, and... You know what I mean? It's on our side, too. Like, we can sense an authentic conservative.
You mean all of them?
Well... I'm not as far right as you, I guess.
When I see the word conservative, I see trying to conserve something, which I don't see any conservative politician doing.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and lose all of your respect in one single go right now.
All right.
This is on my wall. I have a William F. Buckley poster on my wall because I am I am a...
Because you are a new rights sellout.
Oh, I'm a moderate. I don't... I am a moderate in any sense of the word. I like old school conservatism.
Okay, here's the thing. I meme a lot about William F. Buckley. I do somewhat enjoy the fact that he tries to go and get in more people into the movement, because that was a huge issue with the old right. They never got more people in, so they were dying off. But at the same time, he kind of sold himself off a little bit too much.
I don't know, though.
That's my issue.
I would say the Reagan, what's his name? The famous libertarian who ran for the Republican Party in the '60s. I'm forgetting his name.
Goldwater?
Yeah, Goldwater. I think the Buckley-Goldwater-Reagan moment was an authentically conservative moment. I think that's something we should try thinking about why that worked.
I find all of them to be authentically conservative. The issue is they tried to then use the Cathedral to go and push conservatism, which just didn't end up all that well.
It got something done, though. I mean, the Reagan coalition lasted 30 years. That's
For a while. For a while it did, but all of Reagan's positive reforms were basically gone after Clinton.
But I don't know about Clinton, though, because Clinton he's the one that famously said the era of big government's gone. So how much did he get rid of at that point? I mean, at the very least...
For example, he did quite a bit of damage for conservatism, which is... Well, when I look at conservatism, I see not wanting to go and be hyper-interventionist and wanting to generally leave other areas alone unless it is a genuine threat to national security. And H.W. Bush kind of destroyed that notion with Desert Storm. Reagan did too with Grenada.
I don't know if I would agree with that, but Warhawkism and isolationism are kind of... Oh, my thing just fell off. I mean, to me, Warhawkism and
I mean, how did Iraq threaten the United States?
Well, I don't... beyond the fact that Kuwait had oil that was specifically... that would affect us, but...
Well, by then we didn't even own that oil company.
Right.
Kuwait's oil was state-owned, so... And it was already hostile to us because of OPEC.
I mean, I think the Gulf War was kind of an expression of what the post-World War II world order was trying to be, which was, if a major nation steps out of line, the world community will come together and stop this nation from being tyrannical and hurting its neighbors. Which I personally don't have a problem with, but I also think I'm also not the biggest critic of Warhawkism, so I don't mind if the U.S. says, oh, there's horrible war crimes happening in this country, we're going to send a couple tanks in and fix it, and then it'll be done. I don't have a problem with that, if only just because, as long as it doesn't drag out into like a Vietnam War scenario where you don't handle the war well and you just keep sending in people and people are dying and they don't know why. That's not the kind of thing that the Americans should do obviously, but I don't mind if we follow the Powell Doctrine and if you're like, okay, what is the purpose of this war? What's the exit strategy? What is the goal? Like, if we do that, I have no problem with being interventionist. But it has to be something you have to follow the Powell Doctrine. Am I completely out of line in that line of thought, or?
No, at least you actually at least try to rein yourself in. Instead of just going, LOL, let's bomb something. Bottom text.
Bomb, 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 Iran. Bomb, bomb.
When you bomb middle schoolers, LMAO bottom text.
Lol, dead.
LOL bottom text. I should go and make that a picture with a B-52 in it.
Oh my gosh.
But, I mean, for me, I'm only in favor of...
Did I lose you? Shoot, I might have lost him. Let me try and make sure I didn't... Hold on, let me check my my phone and make sure you didn't just scream at me online. Can you hear me at all? Alright, I'm just gonna call him back. Can you hear me now? Ah, gosh, what the heck. Can you hear me now?
Yes, and now I'm back. I think my Wi-Fi just cut out, so I had to go and use the other connection.
All right. So what were you saying?
Oh, like, I'm only of the opinion that the state should only fight conflicts when it is in the nation's interest. And when I mean nation's interest, I mean it is to go and defend the nation, not to go and fight offensive wars. I'm not in favor of that at all.
It really
for example, when Panama seized the Panama Canal in 1989, yes, I would be fine with sending the troops to retake the Panama Canal.
Okay. And that's an obvious example of when you should fight, is retaliatory against something that's national interest related. I mean, just in general, though, yeah. I would not consider myself... It's like you said, I think you kind of have to have a good balance between being isolationist and warhawk. Otherwise, you let too many... if you let too many bad things on the far end of the globe by, it's not good for them. There's a lot of people that whose situations could be fixed very quickly if the Marines came in and just wiped a couple of bad people out. But as to whatever degree you can mitigate large-scale wars...
Also at the same time, though... Well, at the same time, is it the U.S. government's job to go and look after people in, for example, Azerbaijan? I do not think so, because they are not Americans.
Maybe we shouldn't drone strike every other street in the Middle East, but it depends on what your goal is and what you're trying to accomplish. Like it obviously we don't want. But to me, the worst possible scenario would be the one where China becomes the new world police. Like, even if... I know you said that you don't think they could, but imagine if they had the kind of drone strike capacity that we did, and then they started taking drone strikes wherever they wanted. That would be probably a lot...
Chinese drones, so they'll break down. They'll likely drone strike some village in China instead.
Well, assuming that their technology worked, I would assume China would be a lot more aggressive.
That's assuming quite a bit for China.
I take them seriously. I think that they're a serious threat, even if they do have a lot of incompetence one way or the other.
I mean, I can't take...
Sorry about that, people. My computer committed suicide briefly, so I had to reset the CPU. Or the CPU, every once in a while the CPU gets overused and I have to stop it. But anyway, is there anything else you want to cover tonight before we finish up?
I was just going to use the analogy for China's best jet fighter, which is a bootleg of a bootleg.
Oh,
like, they bootlegged the Israelis and they bootlegged the F-16 in the 70s. So I don't see how this is a threat.
I mean, the Soviet Union famously took all of our planes apart and rebuilt them from scratch. So it's not surprising that China would pull that crap too.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear that story? How they built
the Soviet Union, though, at least. Yes, I know how the Tupolev Tu-95 was designed. It's literally just a B-29 evolution. However, I will give it to the Soviets that at least they innovated. The Chinese really didn't. They just took the Israeli tech.
Well, there you go. I, for one, welcome our new Chinese corporate masters, and would like to remind them, as a prominent media personality, I can be useful in ushering people to the underground salt mines. But, yeah. Do you want...
I, however, do not, because I'm Japanese and unapologetic about it.
Well, unfortunately, I'm a William F. Buckley fan, and therefore a cuck. So, do you want to plug your stuff real quick?
Huh?
You want to plug all your stuff real quick before we go?
For what?
Do you want to plug your Twitter and podcasts and stuff, or?
Oh, yeah, sure. You can go and follow me at Misesi in Chicago on Twitter. And you can also go and catch me in British Night on Wednesdays and 3 p.m. Central Time on YouTube with the Current Crusade podcast.
All right. That's been episode. We're gonna finally have a long form talk with you after the last one, so we'll have to do.
Yeah.
We'll definitely have to
The
do this
last
again.
one, I said 5 words.
Gosh dang it, Alkazai. But yeah, have a good day then.
Yeah, you too.
The AntiSocial Network is a Groupthink Productions podcast. Editing, producing, and hosting are by Tyler Hummel, artwork by Crystal Calley, and original music was composed by Melissa Lafira and the late Dan Smolla. Like, subscribe, and please let us know what you think about the show in the comments below if you'd like to see anyone interesting be a guest on the show. Thank you for listening.